This show is brought to you by Carnegie Hall. Carnegie Hall presents the program Rhiannon Giddens Songs of Our Native Daughters. Giddens teams up with kindred banjo players to shine new light on African American women's stories of struggle, resistance, and hope. With unflinching, razor-sharp honesty, they confront frequently sanitized views about America's history of slavery, racism, and misogyny from a powerful Black female perspective. The performance takes place on November 4th, 2022 at 8 p.m. To purchase tickets, visit carnegiehall.org. Carnegie Hall, your seats are waiting. Hey, what's up, good people? It's Jay Ray, the co-host of Q Points, and I wanted to come to you because there are two really important ways that you can support our show. One is by subscribing to it wherever you listen to or watch your podcasts. Q Points is pretty much everywhere. The other thing that you can do is you can visit us on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, and on Podchaser, and you can leave us a star rating. Please rate us 5 stars because you know you love Q Points. And on Apple Podcasts and on Podchaser, you can actually leave us a written review. It's not required, but it really does help to spread the word about the show, and it helps people to discover it as they're looking for new podcasts to listen to. We're always appreciative of you supporting Q Points. We thank you so much for all that you've done for us so far, and enjoy the show.
See, I knew you just couldn't get enough of one episode. Welcome back to another immersive episode of Q Points. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sitting here with my brothers here. We are discussing country music from the Black perspective, and we are so honored. First of all, I'm always honored to have my co-host right next to me. So, and if I haven't introduced myself, I'm Sir Daniel, if you didn't know by now. And next to me,
What's happening, y'all? I'm Jay Ray, also known by my government as Johnny Ray Cornegay the Third.
and as I said at the top, this is Q Points, your safe space for intimate and detailed conversation, because this is about to be super detailed tonight. Well, this particular episode in regards to country music, but we're always talking about Black music and Black excellence and giving props to the forefathers and foremothers who have laid it down for Black artistry. And we are super, super, super blessed to have with us again. Listen, I consider him the third Beatle around here. He is now officially a member of Q Points. I'm talking about none other than Big Mike. How you doing, Big Mike?
I am good. That's high praise. I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
You've earned it, man. Yes,
you certainly
you
have
are
earned
an
it.
Honorary host of Q Points.
Absolutely.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Good to be back. I'm excited to talk about our topic tonight. I'm really excited for it.
So let's just dive into it. I mean, we kind of laid down the foundation the last episode, and we gave you a crumb to follow us. We're talking about none other than Charley Pride this episode, and the last thing, Mike, you left us with a major nugget. Charley Pride was knighted or given the responsibility of being the lone Black gatekeeper in country music, and people were actually told, if you were a Black artist trying to break into the country scene, were actually told, you need to go speak to Charley Pride before you even come over here and try to get on any of our stages or any of our showcases. And Charley Pride right now, for those of you who are following on, and I'm listening too, I'm just like a listener, he is being presented to us as the gatekeeper, and what kinds of power and what kinds of responsibility came along with that. And Mike, I just want you to take it away.
Charley Pride is probably the lone African-American Black person in country music. He is the guy that everybody refers to when they talk about African Americans in country music itself. So he's kind of an iconic figure. He's one of the pillars that I would consider, right? We got DeFord Bailey, we've got guys like T Tot. Those guys are pillars upon itself. They're foundations of those things, right? But upon that foundation, here's a better metaphor. Upon that foundation, Charley Pride is literally building, it becomes one of the pillars of country music, not just in the African American community, but in all of country music, period. And what's interesting about that, as I was doing a little bit more research to prepare for the show, is we wouldn't get Charley Pride until late 60s. Late 60s. So when we talked last time, we were talking about DeFord Bailey and his performance on the Grand Ole Opry radio, but he was kind of the person of color that really let other people know that African Americans are here in this space, right? He kind of owned the space. He kind of innovated that space, especially in the harmonica, when it came to the harmonica and that sound, adding that to the country sound. And then after DeFord, there really isn't anyone else, right? There's uh, a gentleman named by Clarence Gatemouth Brown, I believe, but he's not as big, right? And then we get some of the other artists that kind of dabble in country. So we have like Ray Charles in the 60s. He crosses over, but he's not solely country music. We have the Pointer Sisters who dabbled in a little bit of country, right? But they're not considered country artists. We do not get a legit country artist, right? Who crosses over, possibly like crosses over to something else until Charley Pride. He becomes the guy that really ushers in that we can own this space too. We can achieve in this space, and other people will appreciate our work, not just because of the pigment of our skin. And so that's how we get to Charley Pride, right? And so it's just a very interesting journey that it took us that much time in order for us to get an African American country superstar, right? And Charley Pride was born in 1934 in Sledge, Mississippi, and him and his father picked cotton. They were sharecroppers, and they picked cotton. And Charley, I guess they listened to a lot of music on the radio, right? And Charley was like, "Oh, I think I can do this." But that's not his first love. His first love is baseball. He joined the Negro League, Iowa State League at the age of 18, and then joined the Memphis Red Sox. And he excelled. He kind of owned all of the records. Those guys they were talking about, eventually you're talking about Willie Mays. He wanted to be mentioned into the same conversation with those guys, right? And he took his beat from Jackie Robinson. He saw Jackie Robinson cross and Branch Rickey kind of cross that barrier into Major League Baseball, breaking the segregation barrier. And so he wanted to play baseball. He knew that that was possible to play baseball. And so he wasn't even thinking about music, right? He would play baseball during the day and then perform sometimes at some clubs at night. It was basically something that his friends, told him to do. He got drafted into the military in 1956. He got moved to Montana because of the military. He was released after 14 months because he never got deployed. And so while he was in the military, he was also singing at the officers club. When he got to Montana, he played some minor league baseball because the Smelt Company had a semi-pro team. And then at night, of course, he would perform. And then it just happened to be that his landlady that he lived with in Montana was like, "Oh, you should do gigs." And then he booked his first gig in Montana because of this landlady. Right?
She like, "Listen, you could do some things.
Yeah,
If you
she heard him sing and was like, "Oh, you should sing more." And so it was just funny how things kind of worked out. And then he somehow managed to, be at the woodshed, chopping away, honing his craft. And then Merle Haggard was looking for an opening act. And that is how he became the opening act for Merle Haggard. And that really is what launched his music career at that point, is opening for Merle Haggard. And so I think it's profound because you usually find what you're destined for on the path of something that you're really looking for, right? You think you're going after this and you go, oh, that over there looks really appealing. It's kind of how I felt about radio, right? I was after radio and then I found podcasting and I was like, ooh, I can do this. This is something that I can do and I think I can excel at that. So that's kind of that's like really the abbreviated early years of Charley Pride is how he got into music. Music wasn't even his first choice. Baseball was.
I've noticed a very common story amongst people, especially Black people, um, in that era. Black people who came to, excel in sports and music and whatnot. There was like a super, I don't know if they had like they all had like this super nomadic life, and they were very young when they started out. A lot of these young people, they were super young. They left home, but I guess in that era, it was commonplace to leave home at 16, 17, 18 to start foraging out your own life. But to move from, it was Mississippi all the way to Montana, was very commonplace for young people to go, I guess, where work was, to follow and also to pursue your dreams.
What you're saying is absolutely true. Like it just,
Mhm.
I think he left because of the military. He really wasn't moving to Montana because he wanted to move to Montana. That was where he stationed, and it just happened to be where he seemed to thrive at that point. And I think in between that, he met his wife, and she had no interest in marrying a athlete or an entertainer. And in the documentary, she goes, "I ended up marrying one in this, both essentially." So it's just very interesting to see that his focus really wasn't music. He was an all-star at baseball. And if given an opportunity, he probably would have played in the pros. But he wasn't given an opportunity.
Wow. And the other interesting piece. So, okay, you have this whole sports um angle, and you mentioned this as well in your introduction about Charley Pride, is oftentimes with Black artists, you find that there's like a gospel thread, or a blues thread, or a jazz thread that kind of leads you to the whatever the thing is. Charley Pride, it was like a through and through country music
100%.
artist.
100%.
And and I was even in research, like looking for, like, did Charley Pride do like a jazz record, or Charley Pride do like a soul record, or and it was like, no, Charley Pride's gospel records were country gospel records. I'm like, that is the most unique thing that I have ever seen, because that's not the traditional path.
Not at all. No, no. Most people kind of cross over into country. They start off popular music or whatever it is, or gospel, and then they cross over to country. They're never legit country artists. And I think that's what made Charley very special, is that he was a legit country artist. Like he loved country. And I think that is what made him so special. But I also believe that he happened to be in the right places at the right time, right? And was prepared for those things. One of the coolest things I felt was where he really got his break was not only just the Merle Haggard concert, but in 1962 he met a DJ named Tiny Stokes, who arranged for Charley to have an audition with Red Foley and Red Sovine. And so those two guys at the time in country were pretty big names. And he auditioned for them and they thought he was great, and so they wanted to really try to foster him into this whole country music thing. So he just happened to be in these right places at the right time, and people loved his voice. He had such a country voice, and so
Yes.
many people will go, if I closed my eyes, all you can see the art, you can hear the artistry in his voice. That's how good he was. And it was, and I keep reminding people is that was his second dream, his second destiny,
Mm.
right? And so, and when I say that, it's not like he took it lightly. This man, and I have it written down here, he has 69 chart records, 52 in the top 10, 29 number ones. Tell me how that is your second choice.
Wow.
That was ordained for him to do.
It was absolutely.
How is that your second choice in life? How do you just happen to fall upon being the best at, with baseball, he was an all-star. Country music, how do you stumble on being the best as your second job career or career period? Like, it's amazing what he accomplished, and just happened to be in the right place at the right time, and the right people who understood that there was talent meant more than the pigment of his skin.
You went right where I am stuck on the fact that I can't imagine the stories he had or what he had to endure for the fact that he was doing the level of work that he was doing at the time that he was doing it. It's hard today. It's hard in 2022. This man is a pioneer. What types of crazy stuff did Charley Pride have to get through to get to the stage?
And here's the craziest part about it. He didn't have to deal with anything. He said in his documentary, he said Jackie Robinson had to deal with all of these words and all of this hatred, and he didn't have to deal with any of it. He said, I didn't deal with any of it. Half of the stuff that he dealt with. Wow. That was what was amazing to me when he said it. I was like, you're telling me he didn't deal with any of it?
So he's a true anomaly.
He is a true anomaly. He is a true anomaly. And I mean, he gives credit to his mother. And he said, I'm paraphrasing here, but she basically told him that there are good and bad people in this world. And it's about how you engage with those people, right? Knowing her son was getting ready to go into this world, she just told him that there are good and bad people in the world. Some people are going to love you and some people are not going to. And he just leaned into that person. He said, I'm going to get out here, sing my music. And if they love me, they love me. If they don't, then oh well. And he handled it with such grace. Like, you hear these stories about people and you keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, and you don't hear about that with Charley Pride. He understood his role. He understood what he needed to do, and he excelled at it. He didn't just show up and do half acid. He's got 69 charted records, 29 number one hits. Right? So that he's got Grammys, he's got CMA awards. And so he showed up. He showed up for for people who look like us. And he did it without having, sometimes people like us go, we demand that you represent us. We demand that you do these things because you're the only one in that space. And he did it his own way. And he didn't let other people determine what he was doing. There's a story in the documentary about when Martin Luther King died, April 4th, 1968, I believe, is the date. And he was on tour with a person, with another artist named Guy Mitchell, and he was in Big Spring, Texas. And the Opry had shut down. They were not having any performances for 45 years. They've had performances. This was the first time they'd canceled performance because of Dr. King's death and assassination. And so they asked Charley Pride. Charley was contemplating whether or not he was going to perform. So he said, I hopped in a taxi, and I guess there was so much police and rioting going on at the time. The guy goes, I have one of them in the car. And Charley, in the documentary, he goes, I noticed that he said one of them. Right. And then he got to the venue, and he was trying to decide if he was going to take the stage. And he decided to take the stage, in Texas. They applauded for him, but they didn't say a word. And he said, I didn't say it. I didn't talk about it. And they didn't say anything to me. They applauded. And he said, what made the difference is that I was the only person that looked like me in that room. And they stayed and they listened and they applauded. And he said, that's what I chose to do, is go out in there and play. And some people, today's age, somebody would be like, he'd walk out on that stage and he would be lambasted for not saying a word.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Chrisette Michelle didn't have a career for like 5 straight years
Yeah.
because she took a gig.
Yeah.
I think there's a lesson. One of the lessons I take from just hearing that story is one, sometimes shit is just complicated. Two, um, we get to choose. It's okay. Whatever we choose to do in the times that we choose to do it is okay. It's just a choice that we made. And the choice that he made was to get on that stage and have this crowd have to reckon with the fact that this black man is standing in front of them, giving them their life.
And can I add to that? It's probably when you're the first to do something, a lot of people think that it's hard. And like Mike said at the beginning, we were probably all like, he probably must have went through it. It's super hard being the first to do something. But on the other side of that same coin is being that you're first, you can make the rules up as you go along. There aren't any rules that he had to stick to. Basically, he like you were saying, he probably didn't know. He didn't have to think about what he was supposed to look like because he didn't have that kind of representation before him. Like all of us, if we're hopping into podcasting, if we want to be rappers, DJs, we kind of know what that's supposed to look like. Charley Pride didn't have any of that. He didn't have any kind of blueprint or any kind of guide to go by, and which is possibly for the best, because and probably gave him the fearlessness to stand in front of that crowd in spite of a national, something as nationally horrible going on at the time as Dr. King's murder, his assassin, and still be able to stand in front of them. Because to your point, if that happened in 2022, Charley Pride would have been canceled, dragged. What else can we have called him? He would have been all the things in 2022, but that was definitely thanks to him being born at the right time and the right, the universe has a way of doing things.
Mm-hmm.
And it's best that Charley Pride was definitely there when he was.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. He just had a charisma about him that I think a lot of people took to. And I've seen some interviews with him, and he addresses the pigment. He says he's like, I have different pigment than you. That doesn't make me any different. He was just very charismatic, and people were drawn to Charley in that sense, in my opinion. And so it was just really cool that people just heard this voice and they were like, oh, this guy, he's going to be famous, right? Even to the point where he met his manager, Jack Johnson, stayed with him for most of his career, introduced him to Cowboy Jack Clement, who was the producer for most of his career. And they were probably more worried about it than Charley was. In fact, his debut album, on the cover, it says Country Charley Pride, because they wanted to make sure that the DJs understood that this was a country record, that this was a country album. And when they released the album, they didn't do traditional promotional headshots or bio, because they wanted to make sure that people heard it first. And then when they heard it,
plastic.
then they wanted to play it. But these two, Jack Johnson and Cowboy Jack Clement, they were smart. They were hip to the game, right? Because they were very famous. And then eventually Jack Johnson introduced Charley to Chet Atkins, and he was an upcoming writer at RCA. And then he heard them and signed Charley Pride to RCA. And now, I mean, and from there it was just like boom, 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 like how he just became one of the biggest country stars there. And what legitimized him is he was doing a show with Willie Nelson, probably one of my dad's favorite country artists.
Mm-hmm.
Willie Nelson on the stage at this huge country jamboree, kissed him right on the lips.
Oh, Willie. I love Willie Nelson.
Willie kissed him right on the lips, and it helped endorse Pride along with some other country artists as a legitimate country artist.
Wait a minute. Did he kiss him or was he shotgunning him?
No, he was kissing him. He kissed and they both. It's funny in the documentary. Charley Pride and Willie Nelson, they're sitting together across from each other, and he goes, he's like, and I just kissed you on the lips. And then Charlie, you see later that Charlie gets him back. He was like, that was payback for the stage. Like, and they both laughed, but it was a big moment. And Willie said, if I could kiss this man on the lips, then you can listen to his voice.
Wow.
You can listen to his music.
Interesting. And so you've been talking a lot about the acceptance that the country audience gave Charley Pride right off the rip. Then I think about artists like the Fifth Dimension, and how when they came, when we did the show regarding the Summer of Soul movie, and how when the Fifth Dimension came to Harlem to perform, they were very nervous because they were coming from the West Coast, and a lot of people weren't really certain about that sound. They didn't, they were questioning the blackness of it all. And I'm just wondering, like, what were the Black audience's reactions to a Charley Pride? Because we could be a little unforgiving and we could be a little tough, but I just wonder about that. And like he for him to get acceptance right off the bat from the country audiences, I wonder what the reception was like, at Showtime at the Apollo.
What I find fascinating about Charley Pride, so of course, now I'm going to go just into like my music history or my experiences with music. Charley Pride was one of the first country artists that I remember hearing about because my mom was such a huge Charley Pride fan. You know what I'm saying? So I think for at least the upbringing that I had, for the Black folks that also were into country and pop, those Black folks were hugely into Charley Pride too, and weren't questioning his blackness or non-blackness in any particular way, because it was like, yo, he's from the South. This makes sense, right? So I think there's always the question of country as a white man's music. It's funny that I said it that way, white man's music. That's why women in country have always had to like fight too. But yeah, from my experience, Black folks always kind of felt some fondness for Charley Pride if they were into country anyway.
Yeah, and it's because like I said, I think he's the lone figure, right? That you can really go, he's a Black dude. He sings country. We have to have some things in common. And I think that's why people really gravitate towards him. But he was a superstar, like not just in US, globally. He was a superstar. He traveled in Europe. He sold tens of millions of records worldwide, not just in the US. He was global. He just wasn't here. He was global. And I think at that point, when you're such a force like that, you can't deny it. You can't deny it. And I think he had a great team. I keep saying these names, Jack Johnson and Cowboy Jack Clement, but Cowboy Jack Clement worked with Johnny Cash. And in the documentary, they say he must have understood that low type of voice that Charley Pride had, because Johnny Cash had the same type of voice. So they were able to craft songs and craft sonically around Charley Pride to make him sound really good. And then you have a guy like Chet Atkins, head of RCA, who took a chance, who saw that Jackie Robinson thing with Bryant Ricky and was like, oh, we can do this. This can be done. He has the voice to do it. And it had to be a good voice. If his voice was shoddy, he wouldn't have gotten very far. Yeah. But the fact that you can close your eyes and hear it in his voice, that means something, which is what I think these three white men, and I want to be very clear, these three white men why we're taken to Charley, who didn't care what his color was. They just saw someone, and they didn't relegate him to the race records, as they used to call them, right? They understood that he was going to cross barriers and knock down walls, not just here in the US, but also globally. And so these guys, for some reason, just rallied around Charlie, and they pushed him forward. They didn't hold him back. They didn't try to hold him down. They understood that the music was going to transcend his 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 color. And I think in the documentary, Charlie mentions that Cowboy Clement said, 50 years from now, Charlie, people are still going to want to hear your music and you're still going to want to sing them. And at the time he was still alive, God rest Charlie Pride's soul, but he said, he's like, and he's pretty spot on, because that he just recently died like 2 or 3 years ago. So I think he was 89, 86, something like that. And he said he was right. I still want to sing him and people still want to hear him. So, I mean, that tells you to the longevity of his music, right? And who he was as a person. And he always wanted to talk to artists and people, and was just very kind. But I think he understood what his role is. He understood that he was the first of this and he needed to excel, but it also comes with the downside of that, which is why we're going to talk about this whole Charlie Pride effect, because it took a long time for someone of Charlie Pride's character to break through in country music again. And because he was the standard, and as a standard, he was high, right? He was up there. It took a lot of it was going to be at least 30 to 40 years before somebody could even touch what he did. In fact, the first black male to do it was Jimmy Allen, to become number one country record as a African American male. He was the one that broke Charlie Pride's record. He was the guy. So it just, there's an upside and there's a downside to Charlie Pride. There's something to be very prideful of Charlie. Yes, that's us. He is there. He is considered royalty when it comes to country music. I was watching this documentary and people like Bobby Bones and Garth Brooks, Dolly Parton, they're all singing his praises. And with that kind of recognition and that kind of history, it's hard to live up to. So now that I understand better about Charlie Pride, I understand why it took so long for someone to kind of break through, because they were holding anybody that stepped through that door after Charlie was held to the Charlie Pride level. It helped us and it hurt us at the same time.
Yeah, it's crazy that you say that, because it makes sense. So in preparation for this show, I was like, well, let me, dive into some Charlie Pride performances. And I was like, God damn, like,
Boy
he's
can sing.
like he's just up here singing and all of it, baby, the most white people you could ever find is his band, like background singers, do, and Charlie's just up there singing. And I'm sitting here like,
yeah.
The
voice
steel
guitar player that's on the stage with him to I think his right, that's like his best friend. He was in the documentary. And like they were going to meet another country artist, I guess, that was kind of the gatekeeper at the time. And they were like, well, Charlie, when you meet him, he's probably gonna say the N-word to you. He didn't. And so when Charlie met him, I forget what his name is, something Flown or something like that. But when he was like, Mr. Flown, I'm Charlie Pride. Charlie said his shoulders went up and he turned around and he said, Charlie, I really like the music you're doing. And then he said something about a jig. And the guy next to him during the interview, the steel guitar player, was like, he winced because he was like, I don't like that word. And Charlie goes, I know. That's what he said, though. It was just funny how these people are so protective of Charlie. And you must have known that he probably had a really good team with him through all of these years.
Yes, I would imagine that he had a amazing team, managers, whoever was doing the things was doing the right things behind the scenes.
And here's the cherry on top that I don't think a lot of people know. He was diagnosed with bipolar disorder.
Really?
When he was overseas touring. He said he had trouble sleeping and he was having all of these issues, and they realized that he had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder. And so he started taking his medication. And so all of these people came up to him and was like, thank you for letting us know that you're this, and you started taking your medication. Because of you, I started taking my medication. And so imagine this whirlwind, you're like this country superstar. Essentially, you're the face of country at this point, and then you're diagnosed with bipolar disorder. And you have to manage that on top of the craziness that the entertainment world gives you. Crazy. And he did it with grace. He did it with grace. That is the thing about it, is that he did it with grace. So when we talk about the Charley Pride effect, it's not just that. Right? It's not just that he was the standard and it made it hard for everyone else, but he was the standard because of the things that he did and the things that he was able to overcome. The man was picking cotton. He was picking cotton with his dad, and now he's touring the world. It's insane, the things that he accomplished. So I know people can talk the praises of Charley Pride, but when you get into the nitty-gritty of it, you really understand why he was who he was and why he's royalty when it comes to country music.
Wow. Mike, that blew my mind. You have to please, we'll make sure that we include the link to the documentary that you watched as well. So other folks can.
Yes, I'm nonplussed by those facts that you just dropped as well, Mike. But it also makes me think about how if other artists in that era were treated with the same kid gloves, with the same love and care as how Charley Pride was taken care of, how many of those artists that died young or died penniless could have lived to the ripe old age of 86, 89 years old, still performing, still, holding on to the money that they earned, and still have that money because they had a team that took care of them the way they took care of Charley Pride. And it's like, it can be done. It could have been done. And it can be done today if the teams that are around artists are well taken care, are people that actually care about the artists. And it's lovely and it's sad at the same time, but those are the types of stories that we explore on Q Points, because it's part of, music is part of the human experience, and we are going to come across these stories like this. So, wow.
It really is wow. And what you're saying is that my wife really said that to me as we were watching the documentary. She goes, "This is great. Charley Pride is awesome. He represented well, right? But what about all those other people that you're mentioning, Sir Daniel? What about the people that worked twice as hard just to get the half the recognition that Charley Pride did?" And I think one of the things I will walk away as a takeaway, and it's not a mark on his legacy, in my opinion, but how many artists did you turn around, put your hand out, and bring with you, Charlie? No offense to Charley Pride, right?
Right. That's real.
But then I go, well, maybe he was just trying to survive at that point. I think it makes it tough. And I think he contributed in the way that the best way he could. I mean, eventually him and Jack Johnson created a publishing company called Pi Gen. He's a Pisces. Jack Johnson is Gemini. Yes. My wife would be like, "This is sad. You don't know this. This is sad." But yeah, I mean, he started a publishing company, and to help songwriters and stuff like that. But it's kind of hard to knock him, man, because it's the 60s. It was the early 60s when he broke through, 70s when he broke through. Black people were just starting to gain respect, basic respect. Martin Luther King had been assassinated, and it's funny because I'm a documentary fiend, so we were watching this documentary on Netflix about the history of racism in America, and he described it as this hill, and we are pushing this rock up the hill, and every time we get to a tipping point where we're going to actually accomplish something happens and the ball rolls back down the hill, right? And he describes the assassination of Martin Luther King as one of those moments that the ball rolled all the way back down the hill when it comes to the civil rights movement.
Mhm.
And so I think when you look at it that way, Charlie did exactly what he needed to do to be successful and to kind of not bust open the door, but just crack it enough that someone can put their foot in and hold it open for everybody else.
Mm.
Right. And so at that point, then I go, well, then he did his job.
Man,
job.
oh man, he did his job. To that point of putting the foot in and kind of cracking the door open. An interesting history fact.
All right, here we go. Okay, J. Ray,
Here
hit
we
us with it.
go. So, okay, one of the things, of course, we were talking about Charley Pride. We're talking about country music. And of course, Nashville is the cradle of country music. And my main question was, and I used the Google machine, was like, why did Nashville become a thing? Surprised, but not surprised. So, so some of the success of Nashville becoming the music capital that it is had to do, surprisingly, with the Fisk Jubilee Singers. Do y'all know the history of the Fisk Jubilee Singers? So here we go. So in the 1800s, so Fisk University, HBCU, they needed to raise money for the school. So what a lot of schools would do at the time was they're going to do a choir, they're going to do some concerts, whatever. So the Fisk Jubilee Singers were created and put together by students at Fisk University. And these students would sing old spirituals, old Negro spirituals. And it became one of the first times that audiences outside of Black communities could hear these songs in a public forum. And what was unique about the Fisk University Singers is, of course, they were Black people and they weren't singing. It wasn't a minstrel show. They weren't doing minstrelsy with the performance. They were performing these songs in the fashion in which they were meant to be performed. So apparently, the Queen of England may have been the first to call Nashville the Music City because they would started traveling the world. She saw the Fisk Jubilee Singers singing and called and referred to Nashville as the Music City, but the Fisk Jubilee Singers are at the foundation of Nashville becoming the music capital that it is. These students from this Black university, it was probably a college then, traveling the world to raise money for the school by singing songs from Black people.
And they still, to this day, they're still a major draw.
Yeah.
And those concerts are still a major draw.
Yeah, they just won a Grammy recently.
Yeah. So, which is funny because it becomes full circle to me. One of my favorite songs by this country artist named Rodney Atkins, and on his song "Caught Up in the Country," the Fisk Jubilee Singers are featured. Came out in 2019.
See.
So and Rodney Atkins is he is country by every sense of it, but it's one of my favorite songs. Right, I have it. Like, I mean, one of the lyrics is, "I want to keep riding until to where the creek ends," or something like that. My wife goes, "What do you know about the creek ending? You grew up in Rockville." I was like, "But it speaks to my soul. I'm not sure what you're talking about, but it speaks to my soul." But it's just funny that you said that, and then I'm like, "Oh, here they are in country music, backing up a country music star." He put them in there. He's featured them like that. Going back to the other show, when I say that we are foundational, ever since I heard that we are foundational, you can't escape it. You can't escape us. As much as you want to, as much as people want to try to just erase whatever we've done, you can't escape us. We're always here.
Not at all. And listen, if that doesn't make you want to stick around and hear what's on the next episode, because we've got more coming for you. And you know what? You know, J. Ray, what do I always say? In this life, you have a choice. You can either pick up the needle or you can let the record play. This has been another special edition of Q Points with our very special guest, Big Mike, the third Beatle of the Q Points family. And we will see you all on the next episode. I'm Sir Daniel.
J. Ray. I'm Big Mike.
And this has been Q Points. We'll see you next time.
Peace.